Many of our constituents have everything in life. Sometimes what they want and something that they often crave is significance and meaning. And when we do stewardship well, we celebrate their generosity and we allow moments like that to happen.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, a podcast from IPM Advancement. We believe strong nonprofits can change the world, and our goal with each episode is to bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders from the nonprofit sector. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. In the course of creating this NPFX podcast, we meet really talented and very smart people. And the thing about talented and smart people is that they tend to know other talented and smart people. So I thought it would be cool to expand the podcast to include guest interviews. And these are previous NPFX guests who have graciously agreed to reach out to their personal network of fundraising colleagues and bring them on the podcast to share with you their experiences. And launching this series today is Sami Zoss. You may remember Sami from NPFX episode 53, Meaningful Donor Relationships with Lisa Greer, and also NPFX episode 58, The Challenges Facing Higher Ed Fundraisers with Emily Berry. Those will be in the show notes to link back to. They were fantastic conversations. We were immediately hooked with Sami and her experience, especially in donor stewardship. She has an incredible passion for donor stewardship. And so I want to turn it over and reintroduce you to Sami and welcome her back to the podcast. Sami, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back and to be doing this with you guys.
I am excited too. And this is a new format for us where I'm actually turning the microphone over to you. And you have a fantastic guest. So before I do that, I want to first ask you to reacquaint listeners with your passion for donor stewardship, and then tell us a little bit about this guest that you interviewed and why you chose him.
Absolutely. So my story with philanthropy, of course, started with my own experience being on the receiving end of philanthropic support. And so because of that, it's been really important to me that the donor experience always includes that understanding and connection to the impact. I mean, I remember, I don't know if I've said this on a previous show or not, but I remember I got a donor gave me money to go to some travel abroad, something in Ireland, and their last name was Gallagher, and I got them like coasters in Ireland that said Gallagher on them. Like, it's just been part of who I am and how I feel about people giving when they don't have to make experiences happen. And so it's really been the core of what I love about philanthropy. And that's such a fun story. Like, if I could get students to do that these days, I would be rolling in it, let me tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I love that your interview that we're about to hear includes a few different experiences like that, not only from who you interviewed, Dzenan, but also what he has brought into his career and how he looks at stewardship and tries to deliver that experience to his donors. So
yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about Dzenan.
Dzenan is one of the most wonderful people I think I know. And I'm going to be honest, I know a lot of wonderful people. So Dzenan Berberovic, he currently serves as the Chief Philanthropy Officer at Avera Health, which is one of the major health institutions here in the South Dakota region, and it expands nationally as well. Dzenan and I actually first met back when I was at the University of South Dakota, which is both of our alma mater. And he touches on it a little bit in the interview. But one of the things that I've always sort of admired about Dzenan, and the reason why when we started talking about this partnership, the reason why he was one of the first that popped to my head was he shows how stewardship, like at its core, is integral in every part of fundraising, and how to including and almost especially cultivation, right? He does such a great job of showing that not only like stewardship isn't just this afterthought, it is exactly how we handle fundraising and cultivation and our benefactors. And because of that, they have had immense success, which I'm so grateful that we also got to sort of like give him the microphone to be able to talk about a little bit as well. So I'm so excited for listeners to hear this one.
That's wonderful. So, Sami, before we get into the interview, are there a few things that you want listeners to be attuned to in your conversation with Dzenan?
Oh, of course. I mean, if the right answer is all of it, right? But in particular, listen, Dzenan does a great job of choosing very intentional language when he speaks about the impact of his work and his excitement for the mission that he serves. I think it's really important for listeners to hear, like, those are very intentional decisions on his part, and it becomes second nature for him, but that is trained in his mind. And the last thing I would add, Russ, is just sort of like as a quick note, you're going to hear toward the end of the interview, he uses a word, it's pronounced fasking. It's like thanking and asking within the same infrastructure. And we talk about it a little bit more, but I want to make sure listeners know what we're saying and they aren't just thinking it's a word that they aren't hearing right or whatever. We do explain it a little bit more in the interview, but essentially it's when you ask while also thanking, and it's pronounced fasking.
Well, let's get into the interview and then we'll be back to wrap it up. And then I have some takeaways that I'd like to point out for listeners and then share. And so let's listen.
Good morning, Dzenan. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Sami. Thank you for having me. Great to be reunited with you.
Yes, I'm so excited. You and I share a similar background in how we got started in philanthropy and why we're so passionate about it. But sort of the basis of that is still so different. And so I'd love, if you're interested and willing, could you maybe give a moment early in your life, tell us about what sparked that culture or that seed of giving in your life that's led it to really be your life's career and your life's mission?
Oh, what a wonderful question, Sami. So I think that I found my life's work in a really vulnerable spot as a child. When I was 3 years old, not quite 3 years old, my mom and I fled the war in Bosnia and moved to Germany, where we lived for about 6 years. Much of that time was spent in a refugee camp that was run by an order of nuns. And so my work today at Avera, which is an organization that is co-founded and still sponsored to this day by two orders of vowed religious women, the Benedictine and the Presentation Sisters, this work ends up being very personal to me for that exact reason. And so when we moved to the United States at the age of 9, I was shown incredible kindness. In fact, we wouldn't have been able to immigrate to the United States had it not been for an organization that was helping with resettling refugees. And then I once again experienced philanthropy ahead of going to college when I learned that I would receive a full tuition scholarship to attend the University of South Dakota, which changed my life. It allowed me to be involved as a student, and it allowed me to focus on academics and campus involvement and all of the things that I think enrich our college experiences while not having to worry about working full time. Most importantly, it meant that I could go away for college. I didn't have to stay in the town that I was from and go somewhere else for school. And it also meant that my mom didn't have to work a third job. So for me, this is very personal. Like, I remember being in high school and sharing with people that I wanted to work in the nonprofit sector because I had had experiences that shaped my passion for doing such work. And then when I started as a college student, by the time I was a sophomore, I would tell my friends that I wanted to be a major gift officer someday. Of course, none of them knew what that was, but I'd had some experiences as a college student doing tours for benefactors and for constituents alongside foundation staff that led me to believe that I could potentially do this work. And so that's how I was pointed to my life's work, I feel, at a very young age.
I love that so much. There's something so fundamental about loving the work you do because you were a beneficiary of it at one point. And so it's just really powerful to remind people that most of us get our starts like that. Like, there's a reason we get lit up about this, and it's because we've seen the direct benefit of it. So thank you so much for sharing that. I, in particular, am, and as you know, I've always been really focused on stewardship and stewardship, not in the transactional sense, right? But in the sense that stewardship is truly a vehicle for how we continue to relate our donors, our benefactors to the mission they're serving. And whether that's financial, whether that's time, talent, anything in between, I would love to just hear from your perspective, what does sort of stewardship mean as a whole? And that can be all sorts of things, right? but then what's its role in, particularly in major gift fundraising? I think that's a really important distinction to make.
So I'm blessed at Avera that one of our 3 core values is stewardship. It's stewardship of humans. It's stewardship of our financial resources. It's stewardship of our facilities and our resources that we're provided. So for me, I get to work at an organization where stewardship is already pivotal to the work that we do. And when you do stewardship very well, you start to bring meaning and significance to your constituents' lives. We know that for a moment in time, they paused and made a gift to our organization. And whether that gift is $1, which we have many individuals, especially our employees at Avera, who they give $1 from as payroll deduction. We also know that we have benefactors who provide 7- and 8-figure gifts to our organization. And for a moment in time, whether it's 1 minute or whether it's several months where they're discerning a gift, how blessed are we that we get to be part of that single moment that goes on and touches so many lives.
I love that. I love that phrase, a moment in time. How do you then, as perhaps the fundraiser, and I know in your role as Chief Philanthropy Officer, which is overseeing fundraisers and teaching some of this as well, how do you teach them to appreciate that moment in time and then use that to highlight how awesome it is that Avera or insert organization here empowered them so much that they wanted to give something they didn't have to give, right? Because that's where great stewardship starts. Like you said, how great is it that in a moment in time, they considered this, they considered us, they prioritized us. So how do you teach that mentality of how to appreciate that with the benefactor in a way that is meaningful, not transactional, not, well, now I need to say thank you, so you give us another gift, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's by remembering that we're on a journey with them. One of my favorite fundraising books is The Artful Journey. So I share that with any new fundraiser who I've mentored or coached along the way as we've hired new colleagues to our team. We really focus on that journey that we get to accompany someone on. And as you said, they didn't have to give their resources to us. In fact, they could have saved them for a rainy day. But if we remember that we're on a journey with our constituents, and then how can we make sure that we celebrate and honor their generosity in a way like no other organization does? And it's not, you sitting at your desk and saying, oh, these 10 constituents are all going to get this from us. It's personalizing it. I'll share a story with you, Sami, to highlight this. So we have an amazing behavioral health facility. Avera has provided behavioral health care for more than 60 years to this region. In 2020, we launched a significant campaign to add another wing to our inpatient behavioral health hospital. And it allowed us to more than double in size our adolescent and child units. We treat kiddos as young as 3 years old. And so one of the things that, as we had some conversations with the behavioral health team about philanthropy and how do we honor and celebrate generosity, one of the ideas that came out of that conversation is, could we have a jar that before a child enters the unit, they take a button, like a clothing button that we would have on our clothes, and they place that button in a jar to show all of the kids who have been with us prior to them, and then to remind them of the kids who will follow them. And what we do every single year is we take those buttons and we mail them to our benefactors. In fact, recently we cleared out the jar of buttons because it was a donor's birthday, and we wanted this donor to know how many kids were admitted into our unit on her birthday. And we compiled those buttons and had a bracelet made out of them, which we were able to give to that donor. And these are individuals. Many of our constituents have everything in life. Sometimes what they want and something that they often crave is significance and meaning. And when we do stewardship well, we celebrate their generosity and we allow moments like that to happen.
Oh my gosh, that is just powerful and innovative, right? Like I've got goosebumps, which is not easy to do for me, Dzenan. You know that. Bravo. That's awesome. It actually spins me to another question, which is how do you encourage that innovation and stewardship without also, I mean, there's the resource balance, right, of time and financial resources that Avera has. So how do you balance the need to make sure it's as personalized as it can get? And for some of those principal donors, like an entire additional wing of Avera Health is going to be worth spending a little extra time. But we want that personalized journey for all. So how do you encourage that innovation with the balance of resources and, financially and time? That's something I really struggled with as I was teaching stewardship.
Yeah, I think it comes down to fundamentally, I try to remind our team that our work should be elegant. It shouldn't look challenging. It should be natural. It should be like inviting people to your home for dinner for the first time and you start to become friends. I think that there's all these ways that we can look at our work. And so I think fundamentally it has to be about relationships. And I certainly know that behind the scenes, there's things that all relationship managers should be doing for constituents that are assigned to them. Do we have cultivation and already developed stewardship plans or already started stewardship plans? So by the time that gift closes, we've already started that stewardship, or even prior to that, because the last thing that we want to happen is that folks are wowed by their experience of giving to our organization and all the little important things that we do leading up to their gift closure. And then they make that gift and we moved on to the next constituent. You never want to do that. And so if we can make sure that that wow factor is not forgotten about all along the journey, and then there's some other things that you can have in place. So I put birthdays on my calendar. I put anniversary dates. I put important things. Even when we present proposals to our constituents, we highlight the difference that they had already made, even leading up to that proposal being presented to them. How many individual gift transactions have they made to our organization? How many years have they supported our organization? And so you sometimes see folks who have maybe given a couple $1,000s to your organization, but they've done it consistently. Not be blown away by the fact that you're there asking them and inviting them to provide a 6 or 7-figure gift because they felt that they've already had a relationship with you. You just haven't had a chance to invite them to make a gift at that level.
That's a beautiful way to put that. And I think you highlighted something that I wanted to ask you about. So I want to give you a chance to add anything to it. What other ways, you've highlighted many, but how is stewardship just embedded in your work?
Yeah. So in a couple ways, Sami, of course, you can use data to inform how you're stewarding folks. You can look at donor behavior, regardless of dollar amount, to steward them. In fact, we look at who's given every year for the past 5 or more years consecutively. And there's a beautiful story that Kello, which is a local television news station, did, where we actually surprised our longest standing benefactor with a delivery of flowers. She had donated to our organization for almost 40 years, every single year by that time. Not at major gift levels, but every single year she consistently gave. And so our CEO and I visited Karen, and the news station was with us, and we were able to bring a gift to her. From a data side, we are constantly looking at who needs to be moved into a stewardship portfolio and co-managed with a relationship manager plus our stewardship leader. We're also looking at who's maybe lapsed, who gave during our Q2 2 years ago, but has not given since. Are there some pre-appeals that we can do to them, or what we call entrees of communicating to them, whether it's through handwritten note or through an email, so that they're warmed up by the time that they receive a direct response appeal. And then there's some things that we always have embedded in our work. So the gift receipt goes out within 72 hours. It's hand signed by me. It includes a handwritten note most times if I know the constituent. We also then have a process that we follow in subsequent days and weeks for every single gift. There's a little bit of data behind the scenes that has to be looked at so that folks aren't receiving repeat thank yous or repeat handwritten notes. And then we have something at our organization called Thursday at 3. That's when our entire foundation team gets together for 30 minutes. We do key updates. We always have a strategy session during that. And then we have what we call gratitude hour, where everybody receives a list leading up to that meeting of constituents that for whatever reason deserve a handwritten thank you. Sometimes it's that employee donor who for the first time gifted to our organization. Sometimes it's the constituent who maybe has given to us for 10 plus years, and we want them to know that this is their 10th anniversary of donating to our organization. So it's not consistent every single week. We look at what's most meaningful to that group, and then what's meaningful to us as fundraising staff. I might be Avera's chief fundraising officer, but every single person in our organization is part of philanthropy because this is a team sport. And the reality is, if someone does not have a favorable experience in one of our clinics, in our hospitals, in our hospice facilities, in our senior living communities, they're probably not going to be inspired to donate back to the organization. And so what we want to make sure is that all 21,000 plus Avera colleagues know and understand how they can be engaged with philanthropy.
That's awesome. And I think Avera does a really good job of honoring your employee giving. There's not many organizations that can get the type of employee engagement that you have. And it goes back to what you were just saying about how everyone understanding their role in it. But I'd like to give you a chance to kind of just honestly brag about the awesomeness that is the Avera staff and how you guys steward them and create that culture of giving.
Yeah. What I love most about Avera is our people and the colleagues that I get to do this work alongside. And so for us, we look at employee giving for a full fiscal year. Of course, we do a 1 month employee giving campaign. We joke internally that that's more of a sprint to allow us to reach our overall goals. And I am so proud that our employee giving at Avera is at 30+%, because many of our peers are in the single digits. And for us, it's the culture. It's the culture that exists in every single corner of this 72,000 square mile organization. It's the belief in something greater than ourselves. And I think that's what inspires our colleagues to be able to donate. But they also see philanthropy come to life every single day. I have found that when our colleagues can see that a certain piece of equipment would never have been purchased unless it was for philanthropy, they start to understand why this is so important. Or if they walk through one of our hospitals and they see a patient or a family who received a meal voucher or lodging assistance or a free wig, they see that mission in so many beautiful places. And that's not even to talk about our employee assistance fund, which helps employees who are in crisis, which they themselves can apply for, or their supervisor or another colleague can apply and say, hey, so-and-so is experiencing a financial hardship. They're in need of support. Sometimes it's those incredible things that inspire others to want to donate. And we have employees who have been donors to this organization for almost 40 years who in year 37 of being employed at Avera finally reach out and need support with employee assistance. And so we're humbled to be able to provide that to them.
I remember the first time I heard you talk about that. I think it was just last year. And what a moving thing to show people how their philanthropy can directly impact them, right? I'm used to it in the higher ed space because it's a little more, you can make it programmatic based, some of that stuff. And so to show a healthcare system doing it also shows other nonprofits that it is possible to do it for your staff, for your team, for your people, and ways to show them like, this is what philanthropy is about. It's not just getting money. It's a human to human interaction. And I think you just do that really well, Dzenan, at Avera. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And last year, our employees donated more than $7.5 million.
And how many employees did you say you had?
We have about 21,000. And many of them gave to programs that are near and dear to their hearts. For example, if they serve in our NICU, they likely donated to the NICU. Mm-hmm. If they've been helped through employee assistance, they likely provided a gift to that fund. In fact, almost 200 different foundation accounts were supported last year through our employees' generosity.
That's just phenomenal. I mean, and kudos to you and the team there and your leadership team. I think it's important to call out. I've been lucky enough to hear you speak with your leadership team, and it is clear that that is from the top a priority that we take. Not only do we take care of our people, but it's because our people continue to take care of us, to take care of our patients and our benefactors and everyone in between, that we need to make sure that they understand that they are our greatest asset. They are our greatest billboard. And that's obvious, not just from you, Dzenan, who, some would say it's your job, of course, to say the things that you're saying, right? But I've heard your CFO right next to you, whose job it is to say, hey, we do or don't have the numbers, absolutely underscoring everything you're saying. So thank you for sharing that. I do want to ask you sort of just like for some advice to other nonprofits, especially being a nonprofit is hard right now, as you can imagine, for many. I'm sure Avera feels it as well. But a lot of listeners are in some of those smaller nonprofit spaces and don't have 21,000 is not massive by any means, but it is much larger than a lot of our listeners' organizations. And so I just have a couple questions. We're just asking your advice for them and what you would think as someone who's worked with you've worked with many nonprofits. So we've only talked about sort of higher ed and in particular healthcare. But let me be clear, listeners, like Dzenan has done the gamut and he continues to serve his community on boards and training fundraisers and giving back to his community in many ways. So Dzenan, I wanted to ask you, if a nonprofit wanted to deepen their stewardship, think maybe a smaller nonprofit, maybe even the size of, 20 to 30 staff, where would you tell them to start? What's one small but meaningful change they could make to just get started today?
I love that question. And I would say educate your 20 to 30 colleagues that they can all be involved in philanthropy. Start to show them how they can express gratitude to your current constituents, and then over time, allow them to be engaged in other efforts of fundraising. And I think that if you simplify it and almost take a crawl, walk, run model, it allows everybody on the team to come on board. One of my favorite experiences that I still talk about to this day is I had the honor of getting to know a husband and a wife who were both University of South Dakota graduates, met while they were on campus. And unfortunately, as we were finalizing some gift pieces, the wife was diagnosed with cancer and ended up passing very quickly, but she was served in a hospice facility. And so what the widower, what her surviving husband decided to do was establish a scholarship for aspiring end-of-life or hospice nurses. And so when we hosted him on campus, he knew that we would do a tour of campus, and I had shared with him that he would have the opportunity to meet the very first scholarship recipient. And we were, of course, going to have lunch while he was with us as well. What he didn't realize is that I had picked up on very early when I got to know them was that he shared with me exactly where they met. They met during strollers, which is a longtime tradition at the University of South Dakota. They met on the stage in what's called now Elf's Auditorium. Back then it was Slagle Hall or Slagle Auditorium. And as we were finishing the tour, I opened the back door to Elf's Auditorium, and his student was seated at the table, and we had lunch on the stage where he met his wife decades prior. So I think if we can remember the human pieces of these relationships and details like that, we can make it so worthwhile for the constituent. And believe me, he has never forgotten that experience, because I still hear from him and from his daughters about how amazing it was for him to meet the first scholarship recipient on the stage where he and his wife met decades prior.
Hi, this is Curtis Schmidt, producer of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. If you're a nonprofit professional who has questions about your program, or maybe you feel like you've taken your advocacy, fundraising, or membership effort as far as you can and you need some fresh ideas, then we have a special offer for you today. NPFX podcast listeners can get a free 30-minute consultation with IPM Advancement, no strings attached, when you go to ipmadvancement.com/free. Just enter a few details and an IPM team member will contact you to follow up. It's that easy. That website again is ipmadvancement.com/free. Thanks for listening, and we hope to talk to you soon. Now let's return to the episode.
I know we're coming closer on time here, so I've got, me, I could talk about stewardship and philanthropy with you for hours, but I'd love to hear, I'd really love to hear, do you have any sort of like don'ts of stewardship? What are things that organizations really should try and shy away from, or things that feel like they're right to do, but perhaps are getting a bad light or are being spun the wrong way, too transactional? What's your stay away from this advice?
Top of the list is tasking. And many of you who are listening know and understand likely what tasking is. So it's when you're sending a thank you or an acknowledgement letter and also asking for a gift in that same letter. There's an organization that I deeply love that I'm very supportive of. In their annual giving summary letter that you bring to your tax person, they actually include an envelope and an invitation to also support. And I always step back and laugh to myself because they're sending that to people who likely made substantial gifts in that previous calendar year, and yet they're still asking for a gift. If you think about it, all of those people know exactly how they can make a gift because they had just done so. And so for me, a big faux pas is tasking, and I would encourage, I know that there's opportunities for us to do a soft appeal or to do some of that, but just do your best to be very discerning if you're going to do a task. And if anything, hopefully you learned a new word today as well, and don't do it.
Yes, I love that. For those of you listening, that's task, like literally thank and asking. So TH and then asking is what he's saying. Dzenan, I want to end on a high note. So I want to hear in 90 seconds, what is the thing that you are most excited for about philanthropy, either as an industry, as it relates to Avera, as it relates to an awesome benefactor story we're going to hear about in the news coming up, anything like that, right? Like what do you got coming that you're just super pumped about?
There's a lot. I know that you don't have to look far and hear about challenges in the sector. What I'm excited about is that we're acknowledging the challenges as an industry. So we're talking through donor retention as an industry. We're looking at staff turnover and how quickly major gift officers and other philanthropy professionals are leaving our sector. I think that us acknowledging that there's an issue here is a step in an important direction. And what I'm most excited about is that stewardship is now part of most organizations. For a long time, I think that stewardship was getting a thank you out the door and maybe sending an annual report to your endowed fund holders. We now look at all of the other components related to stewardship as well. And as the industry changes, as our communities continue to recognize how important philanthropy is to organizations that we care deeply about and to organizations that are making a difference, we have the opportunity to elevate this work. And there are thousands of opportunities for individuals to become involved in our organizations through gifts of time, through gifts of treasure, through other opportunities. And I hope that communities continue to reach out and to be willing to be engaged with organizations that they care about.
Awesome. Thank you. What a positive note to land on. Dzenan, I want to say thank you so much for coming on today, for being my first guest. We'll link to your LinkedIn, so I know folks can find you on LinkedIn. I'll also link to sort of your profile on the Avera site if people want to learn more about you or philanthropy at Avera. So appreciative. I couldn't think of a better sort of first start for my stewardship series. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sami. Great work. This was fun.
Sami, you rocked it. That interview was so awesome, and it was wonderful to hear his passion. Both of you are just so in tune with that idea that stewardship is fully integrated into fundraising, right? It is not an afterthought. It is part of what makes an effective program. You're going to produce revenue with a program that has stewardship baked in to the fundraising process. So a few things that I pulled out of that conversation that I want to, again, highlight for listeners. The first thing is that Avera seems to be, he mentioned those 3 core values, and one of them is stewardship. That's absolutely wonderful. If only all organizations could say one of our core values is stewardship, and it flows throughout the organization at all levels. How inspiring, how wonderful to be able to walk into your job every day and know that one of your core values is stewardship. And then, boy, that button campaign, if you were working on dinner while you were listening to this podcast and you missed the whole button campaign conversation, go back, rewind it, listen to the button campaign.
So good.
Just incredible. The idea that when you're thinking about innovation in stewardship campaigns, getting down to that level of just thinking about what's going to be really meaningful to someone on a personal and human level. Again, I think his comment was, the people that we work with who give money, especially at a higher level, they have everything they could ever want.
Mm-hmm.
But what would really touch them? What would really touch them? That to me is just so wonderful to be able to just take a moment and think about that. Talk about stewardship. That's at the essence of stewardship. So I just thought that was wonderful. And then again, his description and what he shares with staff as his definition of stewardship as being elegant. And it made me think of thinking about stewardship as this work of, if you can make it effortless, that is what the kind of essence of having a relationship-based stewardship program would be. And then I kind of ended on this idea of, you do have all this data, and you have to pay a lot of attention to it. And that data will give you insights into your donor behavior. And it's so important to be able to pay attention to that. And you can use that kind of cold data of recency and frequency and monetary behavior of your donors to have kind of keep tabs on how they're feeling about the organization. And it's so important to do that. It's hard to do. I admit, when you don't have a lot of resources, but it is really important. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one other thing that if you can take the time to just kind of check in with your file on at least maybe a monthly or at least a quarterly basis, and just look for those flags of people who you want to elevate or people you need to be paying attention to. I think that's really important. And again, what really just was the overall thing that I took away from it was that Dzenan believes in the work. He just believes in it so much. And Sami, what I get from you every time we talk is that you just believe in the work, and it's what makes you so passionate about stewardship. And that translates directly into fundraising. And again, it's what makes fundraising so much more effortless. Mm-hmm. And so if you're out there, for the people who are listening, if you're a fundraiser and you're out there and your work doesn't feel effortless, maybe re-examine how much you really believe in the work. Maybe you're not at the right organization, or you're not aligned with what you're fundraising for.
That's true.
Because when you believe in the work, it's such a cliche, but it doesn't feel like work, right? Mm-hmm. You are in it. And you go to work and you're ready, and you're going to fundraise, and you're going to steward your donors, and you're going to be effective, and it's going to feel good, and it just starts to flow. And so,
yeah, you just have so much care.
Yeah, exactly. So those were my big takeaways from the conversation.
I love it. No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you could hear in the interview, I'm always enthralled when I get to talk to Dzenan, and I am lucky enough to be able to call him a friend. And, every once in a while we're able to actually meet in person and be able to do exactly what we did on the interview. And so it's fun for me to be able to sort of share that version with everybody, and to hear what you pulled from it, I think is exactly what I'm hoping, is that people see that, a escapee from Bosnia can come here and make a huge difference, right? Let's not diminish the story that is Dzenan Berberovic too, right? And the idea that he has just made it his life's mission to continue that good work. super inspiring and so fun. And it helps that he's a good person, right? Like we always love that about him.
Absolutely. So thank you, Sami. Thank you, Dzenan, for joining us in that conversation. And Sami, we are going to have you back for our listeners. This is a series, so we're going to have Sami back. We're going to have more conversations. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
We will see you next time on the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange.
That concludes this episode of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. Thanks to our panel for sharing their insights and expertise. If you'd like to learn more about our panel members or any of the organizations or resources featured in this episode, we will include links in the show notes. If you like this podcast, we would love your help spreading the word. First, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app so you always know when a new episode is released. Second, forward the episodes you like to friends and colleagues or share them on social media. Word of mouth is one of the best ways you can help us reach more nonprofit professionals like yourself. And if you use Apple Podcasts or Audible, please leave us a review. Positive reviews are how many listeners decide whether or not to try out a new podcast. We appreciate your help. For suggestions on topics, guests, or nonprofit organizations you'd like to hear on the podcast, send an email with the subject heading NPFX suggestion to contact@ipmadvancement.com. For back episodes and more resources like white papers, infographics, and blog articles, please visit the free IPM Advancement Nonprofit Resource Library at ipmadvancement.com/resources. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.